We've got to stop glorifying the tale of the narcissist. We have to stop worshiping at the altar of charisma and charm and glibness and success at any cost. As long as the hunter is telling the story, toxic patterns will be painted as strong and tough and virtuous. Confucius has said that the beginning of wisdom is to call things by their proper name. Now, I'm not going to call this one a proverb. It's a quote, like I said, from Confucius, and has some interesting bearing when it comes to understanding, the world of understanding, the impact of narcissism on all of us. Okay? Now, for me, what I take from this is very layered from this line. So let's start at the bottom layer, okay? Now, a big issue we have in the world is people take affront at anybody using the word narcissist. A lot of people get criticized for using it. They feel it is too clinical, too diagnostic, too labely, too defeatist. It feels kind of mean. The correction on that is that the word narcissist or narcissistic or narcissism, they're not diagnostic. They are at best descriptive. This is something that I have said countless times. The term reflects a cluster of patterns and behaviors that hang together. Entitlement, lack of empathy, arrogance, dysregulation, anger, a need for control, a need for validation, superficiality, sensitivity to criticism, egocentricity, incapacity for empathy, and an insecurity. It all hangs together. Just like eggs, flour, sugar, baking powder, butter might hang together to make a cake. You really want to say the whole list of patterns all over and over again? And because this word narcissist is such a third rail, many people find that they have to find ways to avoid using it for fear that it'll start family arguments or get HR people angry, or you can't say it in court. It's a great word, but because of the way the world is constructed, we have to talk about the subcomponents of narcissism to be able to make our point safely. And I completely understand the fear of labeling. It can dehumanize, and it reduces the complexity of a person to a word. I get that. I understand that criticism. And if you have a laundry list of patterns that describe a person, you absolutely are welcome to list those out. But we don't ever have a problem falling back on descriptive terms when they fit a social incentive. We feel free to call a person ambitious or fun-loving or clever or even stubborn. Those are descriptive terms. Those descriptive terms are meaningful, and they give us a sense of some elements of the person. And yes, a person can have numerous descriptive terms put on them: stubborn and ambitious and kind and distracted. We can line the words up to get to the nuance of the person. And actually, and we do this all the time, we could do this all the time, we could call someone narcissistic and charming and smart and funny. It happens, it's fine. But by calling it what it is, I may actually enjoy listening to that narcissistic person at a meeting or a social gathering, hear them hold court, or even enjoy their stories because they're charming. But I'm not likely to want to collaborate with them or even attempt a close friendship because they're narcissistic. It's good to understand it all. Now, the next layer is that calling this phenomenon, that is narcissism, by its proper name becomes really important so we don't soft pedal on it. Enablers and those eternally positive people and second chancers and people who don't want to be bothered, those positive people will label it sometimes as, well, they're just difficult, or they're just going through a tough time, or that's just how they are. Yes, it is how they are. So let's call it what it is. When we use these lighter words or interpretations, it makes all of this seem transient. Oh, they're just going through a tough time. And then there's an erroneous assumption that maybe it can change significantly, or even worse, the assumption becomes that maybe this is happening because it's us. Maybe I'm the one who's overreacting to someone having a bad day. Now, of course, that's after that person having hundreds, if not thousands of bad days. But if everyone just says, oh, they're just a little difficult, we blame ourselves. I recently read an article in the LA Times where the author, and it was a really interesting article, was writing about all kinds of badly behaved muckety mucks in Hollywood, studio executives and directors and stuff like that. And the writer, she used words like bully, and they were intense and demanding and difficult and tyrannical. They were narcissists, and even the word bully didn't quite capture it. Bully evokes more of a nasty, insecure kid on a playground rather than the more malevolent and manipulative player in adulthood, which is more narcissistic. Calling something by its proper name means that we know how to interact with it. We can maintain realistic expectations and go eyes wide open into it. If someone is usually respectful and kind and compassionate, and then one day, on the same day, they lose their job and their relationship ends and they're a bit snippier than usual, and then they do actually reach out and apologize and tell you, I had a really rough day, but I had no right to behave that way. I'm sorry. And then they go back to their respectful, kind selves. That's not narcissistic. That, in fact, is a bad day. These were people who are usually kind. Something happens. They weren't particularly nice on that day. They noticed it. They apologized for what they did. They took responsibility and they went back to their kind selves. Like I said, that's just someone having a bad day and returning to a healthy baseline. Now, when a person is usually manipulative and not nice and contemptuous and disrespectful and maybe self-righteous and certainly could be grandiose and charming but superficial, and then on a bad day they turn out to be really mean and really nasty and then doesn't really apologize or blames you and then goes back to their superficial charm, that is narcissism. That's not just a bad day. I have heard people try to call people with narcissistic patterns words like intense, exacting, demands the best from everyone. Here's the thing, it's still just putting lipstick on a pig. It's still toxic. A primary focus of my work is teaching people about these patterns, that these patterns are rigid, resistant to change, how these patterns manifest, the origins of these patterns, the why of narcissism. And then more than anything, that these behaviors tend to hang together. And when you get it, really get it, it's like that day you learned how to tie your shoes or ride your bike. You get it, and then you never hopefully unget it. And then if that is coupled with you learning about your own vulnerabilities and working through your trauma-bonded backstories, then there is a real possibility to become, I don't know, the ultimate narcissist whisperer who finally gets it. The wisdom in understanding this is a pattern and not just someone's bad day is crucial to ensuring that people do not waste their lives, make bad choices, waste time, and stay in impossible situations. Narcissism, like most descriptive terms, describes a pattern. Yes, we all know what a cake is. And yeah, a cake can be a chocolate cake or a vanilla cake or an angel food cake. A cake could be half eaten, or it could be stale, or it could be for a wedding or for a birthday. These other descriptors give us more detail, but at the end of the day, a cake is a cake. It's sweet, it's something we eat, and that part of it is never going to change. Ultimately, a narcissist, almost without exception, is going to be manipulative and insecure and unempathic. That's the definition. And that isn't going to change. And knowing that, that is the beginning of wisdom. Naming it, understanding it, and then behaving in accordance with that understanding. And that means realistic expectations, radical acceptance, and recognizing that rigid patterns like narcissism don't change. So stop trying to fix it. And to everyone out there who takes umbrage at the word, I don't like it, I don't like the us, them, that doesn't feel nice, that feels like you're not being hopeful about human nature. I think that what happens is when you get caught up in your own sort of puncturing of your worldview, you lose the power of what we know about these patterns. The fact of the matter is, you would not be tuning into this video if this was just somebody having a bad day. You wouldn't be on this channel if that was what was happening to you. You're here Because consistently, maybe for months, maybe for years, or maybe for your entire life, you have been perplexed by the invalidation, the lack of empathy, and the meanness that has emanated from a person without provocation. By labeling it and getting it, you can start doing the job that needs to be done, which is taking care of you. Until the story of the hunt is told by the lion, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. I read this and I thought, wow, this just actually captures everything I've been trying to say in all of the work I do on narcissism. It is an African proverb and really captures why it is that narcissistic people have been, continue to be, and always have gotten away with so much for so long. The meaning is obvious. The person who holds the narrative holds the power in many ways, right? And the hunter, the predator, the pursuer is the person who has that power because they're the one who gets to tell the story. This gets at a very big topic, something that has come up in just about every consultation about narcissistic abuse I have ever done. I get this question dozens and dozens of times per week. Doc, why didn't I hear about this sooner? Why weren't we taught this in school? Why aren't more people talking about this? Why don't more therapists talk about this? Each one of those questions is an entire hour conversation. Lots of people actually feel downright betrayed by the idea that nobody ever talked about this or taught anyone about this. It's actually why I do what I do. I'm actually trying to be the lion, I suppose, who's telling the story, I guess, right? I keep a file in my computer. It is dozens and dozens of articles I have come across over the years, up till as recently as today, of news articles and different kinds of articles about every kind of narcissistic person you can think of. From CEOs to doctors to politicians, from stalkers to con men, from Ponzi schemers to grifters, people from all walks of life, all races, all ethnicities, all genders, all ages, all parts of the world. I keep these stories because what's not interesting is their stories. I mean, after a while, all of these narcissistic people's stories read the same. But rather because of the rationalizations for their behavior that are often made in these articles I read, or the unwillingness of people to call the people in these stories narcissistic. The writers will literally use every other word imaginable: difficult, manipulative, charismatic, cunning, glib, intense, chameleon-like, demanding, exacting, visionary. But they miss the clear pattern. And the writers are even shocked when these people are repeat offenders. Now that you understand narcissism, you know it would be shocking if they were not repeat offenders. The hunters are still telling the story, which is why we glorify billionaires and assholes and the grandiose and the arrogant and mean people. I have seen the comments on these videos, folks. We do our best to manage the mean ones, but I've seen them. The trolly folks who make cruel comments about the people who have experienced narcissistic abuse, and that the people who are drawn to this content as being snowflakes or weak. Well, because of course, making mean-spirited, anonymous, mean comments makes you brave and full of fortitude, right? We've got to stop glorifying the tale of the narcissist. We have to stop worshiping at the altar of charisma and charm and glibness and success at any cost. As long as the hunter is telling the story, toxic patterns will be painted as strong and tough and virtuous, and I'm just a little bit of a tough, angry person, but that's all. Think about the danger of this. Throughout history, the existing stories of history normalized authoritarian parents, controlling partners, rageful and abusive bosses, and tyrannical leaders. It is only recent It's only recently that media has become more democratized. Blogs, places like YouTube, and social media have created spaces where a diversity of people, for better or for worse, can share their stories. Whereas before that, gatekeepers such as network executives or producers or publishers, they blocked access and only allowed a small group of people to share their stories, which meant we kept hearing only one story, usually the story of the hunter. The bigger problem is sorting through all of what is out there now. But at a minimum, there is a greater diversity of stories out there. I think now we've just got to teach people how to critically think about all of it. Over time, more and more lions are telling stories. These may be survivors, people who are willing to say that relationships characterized by control and dominance and rigid roles and abuse are simply not okay. That manipulation and gaslighting and invalidation and contempt and cruelty are not okay. That justifying toxic patterns is not okay. It's my hope that more and more information about these toxic and difficult personality styles and their impact on relationships will result in more and more people reading a new kind of information, the story that comes from their perspective, stories that don't cultivate self-doubt or celebrate people who behave badly, but confirm our instincts on what is healthy and what is destructive. So let's stop glorifying the hunters and start paying attention to what the lion has to say. It may just save your sanity and your soul. I don't know if any of you have ever heard this, but it's very beautiful. It's the axe forgets, but the tree remembers. Now, those of you who've been tuning in, you know I love the Proverbs series. It's just amazing, and it's what's so beautiful is how much this is one that has benefited from all of you. In fact, it was somebody who sent me a whole list of African proverbs on which this was. I had not heard this, and I thought it was just a stunner when I finally read it. So thank you to all of you who are actually participating in generating these proverbs from all over the world. So the axe forgets, but the tree remembers. This is an African proverb. Like I said, I find it particularly stunning and beautiful. And it really could be an homage to everyone and anyone who has ever experienced any form of narcissistic abuse. Now, the meaning of this proverb is pretty clear. The thing or the person that does harm rarely remembers the harm it causes, but the thing that was harmed, or the person that was harmed, carries the scars for a long time. And that right there, my friends, that is narcissistic abuse. In the last 20 to 30 years, and maybe even longer, our understanding of trauma has proliferated quite significantly. The exploration of trauma as a psychological experience really started actually around the time of the World Wars, when the psychological wounds of soldiers and these psychological wounds they carried for years after combat. They were carried long, long after. Their physical wounds were healed long after the battles were over. These soldiers, these veterans, carried psychological changes, scars, and responses. We've also seen similar changes in people that had survived war trauma as civilians, as we also observe in people who are sexual assault survivors. We now know that trauma lingers in our minds, in our bodies, in our souls, long after the event has passed. When we look at trauma or the impact of any kind of harm on a person, we focus on the person who experienced it, what it does to them. One thing that many trauma survivors struggle with is the why. Why me? Why was I the one? In some contexts, why may not feel as unclear. For example, in a person who is a soldier, maybe the why them and why were they hurt, not someone else, certainly there's going to be difficulty around that. But within a combat situation, there was an expectation of some probability of harm and hurt. For a person who experiences assault outside of a combat setting, the why me can often drive long-term rumination. But the why makes even less sense
when people are thinking about close relationships. It is damn near impossible to get our heads around the idea that someone who claimed to love someone could actually harm them. The other struggle is that we too often frame relationship abuse as only being physical abuse, and that really does miss a very big part of the boat. When we think about the harms that often stick with people in human relationships, in childhood, in adulthood, it's the psychological abuse, it's the emotional abuse, it's the words that stick with us for a long time afterwards. Words result in scars that often don't disappear. We can play those words back over and over again, and depending on what age we were when we heard those words, and even in adulthood, they can really shape or reshape our identity. This is what happens to the survivors of narcissistic abuse. The years, and sometimes lifetimes, of being invalidated, minimized, devalued, discarded, gaslighted, manipulated. Those psychological axe blows stick with a person, leaving them confused, anxious, and often blaming themselves, which is in essence the equivalent of the tree blaming itself for being hit by the axe. So many survivors may years, months, weeks, or even days later talk to the person who said or did terrible things to them and say, or ask them, why did you say that? Why did you do that to me? And just like the proverb says, and most of you who have survived this, you know, the narcissistic person, the abuser, in essence the axe, will most likely deny ever saying it or tell you that you are making it up, and in some cases, if they do somehow remember or are faced with evidence of the event, will still say, I don't remember. This response, the I don't remember of it all, can be a real mix of gaslighting, denial, and manipulation. Or frankly, maybe part related to this proverb, they may literally not remember. Their lack of recollection, not remembering something that was so important to you, or much more likely their denial of any recollection by a narcissistic person. It's a mix. As I said, many times it is denial or gaslighting. They don't want to come clean on a behavior that doesn't leave them looking good. So they just say it didn't happen. But that moment when somebody who hurt you, when somebody who said something that cut so close to the bone for you and that hurt you, the words that or the actions that stayed with you and stuck with you, it is such an automatic response for narcissistic people to say and do what they want in an impulsive manner that oftentimes they don't even register it. It's just being done off the cuff. So these words or things that they've done that have stuck with you for weeks or even years were basically just a passing tantrum for them. And that awareness that their words that stay with you for years, that was just basically their passing impulsive tantrum, that can be a devastating recognition. This can be even more so, obviously, when it was your parent. Their dismissive words often wounded you in a way that shaped your identity and sense of self. To years later have the parent say, I never remember saying that, when it is a day, a conversation you still remember after all of these years, can really feel quite destabilizing and invalidating. The axe forgets. The tree remembers. The impulsivity inherent in narcissism means that people with these personality styles actually often don't remember. Their unwillingness to engage in self-reflective, mindful presence before saying or doing something means that their bad behavior is typically reflexive. They just do, and don't think, and as such, they may not remember, though it is just as often gaslighting when they say they don't remember. So it's a coin flip, whether or not it's denial or not remembering, and it doesn't matter, frankly. And when something was so impactful for you, and it didn't even register for them, it means that you often cannot understand why this bad thing or these bad words happened. And in this way, the cycle for self-blame can often persist for survivors of narcissistic abuse. Since the narcissistic folks out there often do not, or say they don't, remember what they said or just deny it altogether, survivors are often left wondering if they remembered anything in their lives correctly, and will often get caught in these spirals of confusion and self-blame. You remembered, and that's what matters. And as this proverb wisely states, the narcissistic person likely will not. And that can feel like an invalidation of your experience. And this is why therapy and trauma-informed therapy are so important for working through these difficult relational situations. The ability of the acts to forget means that they can just go through life as weapons and just cutting stuff down just because that's what they do. They will lash out and invalidate others in the service of their fragile egos. It's just what they do. And all of us, I guess that makes us the trees, we remember. And it hurts.
The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. This is a proverb that was actually sent in by a watcher of this channel. Thank you, because it's so applicable. Before we get to that, please, if you're new to this channel and you're finding my videos helpful, please join this wonderful community by subscribing to this channel. And again, you know, I love to talk about proverbs and how they explain narcissistic relationships, so this is a wonderful one. This particular proverb is a Chinese proverb that was sent in by one of the wonderful viewers of this channel. Your initials are RA, you know who you are. Thank you so much again. All of you should know what this proverb means, right? We would be enjoying the shade and the beauty of that tall tree now had we planted it 20 years ago. But that doesn't mean it should stop us from doing it now, because it's still a good thing to do. And maybe if we stick around not long enough, someday we will get that shade and we'll get that beauty. When somebody had sent this in via email, I loved it when I read it because it was so important to fostering the understanding of the healing from narcissistic abuse, but also gives us insight into the regret that people experience with narcissistic abuse. So let's start with the regret part first. Narcissistic relationships are a wasteland of regret. People who are going through this are always playing out various scenarios, like war strategists. If I had done this, then maybe that would have happened. And if I had done that, then maybe this would have happened. If I'd paid attention to the red flags, then that. If I had tried harder, then this. Drop a comment, please, if this kind of regret is something you struggle with in your survivorship. And the greatest regret is, what if I had left a long time ago, say like maybe 20 years ago? Many people will wonder, what would my life have been like had I been able to look ahead and see that this was never going to change? And of course, that's the idea behind this YouTube channel. My hope is that I might save some of you another 20 years. Sometimes people will then fall into the thinking that, well, I already wasted 20 years. Right? Why bother now? I could waste another 30, 40. Who cares? It's just too overwhelming to leave this relationship. So why even try to get a fresh start? And people may feel that way regardless of whether this relationship is with a partner or your family of origin or an employer. Somehow we want to throw good money after bad at that point. But you know it will still be the same in another 20 years. But let's take the brighter look at this as it relates to healing. Sure, you could have left 20 years ago or set boundaries 20 years ago, but you didn't. And your story involved needing to see this more clearly for a lot longer, and now you get it, and maybe other good things came of that, like children. For so many survivors, once they get it, and at that point, perhaps once they get it, perhaps they get out, perhaps they go no contact, perhaps they just set some great boundaries and engage in radical acceptance. It's tempting to think, though, that's where the story ends. But it's actually where the story begins. It's basically the equivalent of planting a tree today. Once you get narcissistic abuse, really get it, you'll be a little dazed and a lot angry. You will experience grief, but you will also learn to spot red flags more easily. You may not fall for the gaslighting as quickly. You'll learn to firewall, and you won't engage or explain or defend, and hopefully you will stop the self-blame and maybe even engage in some self-forgiveness. You will start trusting your instincts. You will be able to recognize the enabling when it's happening. You will learn to say no. You will learn to love your own company and recognize that an evening alone is much better than an evening spent with someone else being gaslighted. You will learn and start living into your authenticity. You'll be more comfortable with your feelings, and hopefully you'll stop gaslighting yourself. Would love to hear a comment from you here. Please drop a comment. If you're someone who has already left a narcissistic relationship, what was this process like for you? And what are the good things that have come from it? Remember that it is never too late to heal from narcissistic abuse. I have received letters from people in their 80s who watched these videos, who get it, and finally took their lives back. It is never too late to grow and heal. It's never too late to plant that tree. The regret is one of the toughest parts of recovering from a narcissistic relationship. The more time spent in rumination and regret, honestly, that's just like still being in the relationship, right? And in a way, all that regret and rumination keeps that tree from growing. Lots of us wasted lots of time in lots of narcissistic relationships. Some of these relationships we chose, some we didn't. But when it comes down to it, that pain from that relationship was a teacher. But it's important that you heed that lesson. So, okay, maybe we're not sitting under, some of you aren't sitting under the shade of the tree that was planted a long time ago. But we can get down to the business of looking into the future of the tree, or sidle up to a skinny little sapling and think about the shade we will enjoy down the line. And we can start cultivating that now. So get your shovel and start digging. Plant that tree. And did this video resonate with you? Did you find it helpful? I hope you liked it. Did you like it? Because if so, please consider, if you did, give this video a thumbs up. It helps to keep this channel growing. And if you think of other proverbs you want me to discuss in future videos, please drop them in the comments too. I'm Dr. RAMANI. Thanks again for tuning in, and I hope these videos are helping you navigate the difficult landscape of narcissistic abuse.